Welcome to the Own It Powercast, the place to be when you get serious about making big changes and accelerating growth in your life and in your relationships. Finally create the life you've always wanted, living life on your own terms. Learn how to take your fear and turn it into powerful choices that will create sustained change. Now your host, Mary Baker.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Own It Powercast, a place where you can come to get what you need to move yourself forward. Hey, it's Mary Baker, and welcome to episode 89, How Fear Can Cost You Dearly. This month, we're going to be talking all about fear and courage. We're going to talk about how fear can cost us things in our life, where fear comes from, how our brain works in that regard, and how to grab courage and slowly but surely start taking back your life. So let's jump in, and today I'm going to give a little overview, and we're going to flesh things out the rest of the month like we normally do. So first of all, let's talk about fear. Fear is there for our survival. We know that. Fear is what keeps you from touching a hot stove twice and playing in traffic. Fear keeps you safe. Fear can often help you make good decisions when there is danger and you have to figure out the best course of action. But fear can also limit us. So I want to talk first about the brain because I think it's important to not just boil this down to some kind of psychological issue and therefore you feel weak or less than or not as strong because you have fear. And I don't think that's fair, and I don't think that's accurate. I think we know so much more about the brain than we used to. So I came across this wonderful article from the Smithsonian Magazine, and I have the link in the show notes. The article is called What Happens in the Brain When We Feel Fear? And they talk about how it's fundamentally a deeply wired reaction. It evolved over time, as our biology did, to protect us from perceived threats. Now, perception is a key word here throughout this month, so I want you to pay attention to that. And it can range from simple, basic bodily fear to existential anxiety in human beings. Okay? So we want to look at the circuitry of the brain and of human psychology and how they go hand in hand. You've heard about the fight or flight response. There are also positive emotional states too, and sometimes we have a hard time, they say, discerning between getting a rush and feeling completely terrorized, are their words. So these are psychiatrists who study fear and neurobiology. And so what they're talking about here is contextual stuff. When our thinking brain, they say, gives feedback to our emotional brain, and we perceive ourselves either being in a safe place, feeling enjoyment or excitement, or in a scary place, like a haunted house. So fear starts in our brain, they say, and spreads through our body to make adjustments for the best defense or how to fight, like our best fight reaction. So it starts in the part of the brain called the amygdala. I'm sure you've heard of that, the almond-shaped set of nuclei in the temporal lobe of the brain. So that is dedicated to detecting emotional salience of the stimuli, like how much something stands out to us. For example, the amygdala gets activated when we see a human face with emotion. It's more pronounced with anger and fear. A threat stimulus, like the sight of a predator, which triggers a fear response in the amygdala, which then activates areas involved in preparation for motor functions involved or fight or flight, unquote. All right. Also, they say it triggers release of stress hormones like cortisol and sympathetic nervous system. So there's bodily changes that are actually involved, and I'm sure you've heard all about that. We learned about this in school. But there's also another part of the brain called the hippocampus, and the prefrontal cortex work together, help the brain interpret the perceived threat. So that's where your higher level processing happens. And so they talk about contextual in terms of we learn fear through personal experiences, whether it's direct experience that we have or an experience that we see someone else go through or they tell us about. Okay, and so then we store that data, that perception, whether something is bad or good, scary or wonderful. So if you have trauma early in your life, you were bitten by a dog, maybe you were physically abused, sexually abused, screamed and yelled at, maybe mom and dad had scary fights every other week, that's trauma. And so you're going to be more easily triggered than the next guy around things happening because you've had the actual experience. It's more likely to be real if it's happened to you or happened to someone close to you. So it's going to be a lot harder sometimes for you perhaps to want to take a risk because your brain says, we're not doing that. I've been there. I know it can happen. I know it can happen when you say no, when you show anger, when you confront someone, when you speak truth to power. And so fear is there. It's there to protect us. What we want to talk about this month is it beginning to get in the way of the kind of life we say we want to have? So if you have trauma back there, if you've had bad experiences, I want you to bring compassion to that, but I also want you to work on healing some of that as best you can so it doesn't get in the way of your life. Now, there are other fears that we can have that are irrational fears because our brain goes crazy thinking of all these what-if scenarios, and it gets more and more into protective mode where we want to keep ourselves safe from everything, even though we know control is an illusion. That's how people become agoraphobic. They don't start there. They start with experiences in their life out in the world that become scary or something happens or they become sick and they don't want to be in harm's way. So they start avoiding. They avoid certain places, certain modes of transportation, being around certain types of people, so they're safe. Eventually, they go home to the box, which is their house or their home, and then they're afraid to leave because there could be danger out there kind of thing. It's amazing what our brain can talk us into. Okay, and I'm sure you have your own stuff. And don't be upset with yourself if you do. I just want you to have compassion and understanding for it, that it's there. It does no good to deny fear, guys. It just makes it bigger and badder and worse in our head. It's like, don't think of bunnies. What'd you just do? You thought of bunnies. We want to accept our fear, but maybe not give in to it. It's a very different thing. So what we often call this is our comfort zone. Where we feel comfortable, where we feel relaxed, what is known, what are we used to, what do we know we're good at, what do we think we have some sense of control over, and our brain comes back into play here, right? Because remember, we just talked about the brain wants to protect us from danger. So if our environment feels safe and there are no bears coming at us, right? That's what the brain wants. It wants a relaxed state. It's easy to stay in your comfort zone and not want to leave. But one of the things I want you to think about today is how small is your box becoming and perhaps how constraining. And who helped you build your box? Who's around you? Are they risk takers or are they fear-based as well? Are they always saying, oh, don't do that, that's not good, or make sure you're careful and make sure you don't do this, make sure you look out for that? And in some ways, these are good things. I don't want to say that saving money and protecting ourselves from identity theft and putting locks on our doors are a bad thing. We need to do some of that. We want to look at taking calculated risks and not playing it so safe that we're not living. So other people can help you build your box. Another way they can instill fear is giving you messages like, yeah, you probably don't want to do that. That probably won't work out. No one's really ever successful at that, or maybe only a handful of people get to go to the NFL kind of statement. It's negative. One way you can stay in your comfort zone is keeping with your routine. Now, routine has its benefits, but when have you last tried something new? When was that? Now, I get it. It's the pandemic. There's some built-in limitations, but I would dare say there are things we can do if we get creative enough. But if you keep it routine, keep it automated and safe, you don't have to risk and you don't have to get hurt. You don't have to fail and you don't have to be let down and disappointed, which plays into the idea of controlling outcomes, right? You have the illusion of control to try to avoid danger, real or emotional. And it's not scary and it's not stressful, and that's what you would prefer right now. So you avoid risk. This is risk aversion. Fear of failing. Really, that's the fear of not having control. Because we don't want abandonment. We don't want to feel like we're not enough. Which, what we're talking about here, what we're actually risking is not threat to physical harm like 100 years ago. It's more so risk damaging my self-concept. Maybe my sponge is full of not good enough and I just can't take any more incoming. So the threat, the perceived threat, is if I'll do that and that won't be okay. That won't go well and therefore I won't be okay. We've talked about that here before. The math doesn't work, but we say that stuff to ourselves anyway. And what the real statement is you are afraid you won't be okay, but you don't know that. We don't know that. We avoid conflict. We fear another's anger, their rejection, maybe loss of relationship. And here we go, abandonment again. Do you see the theme here? Abandonment or entrapment, those are our two biggest core fears, they say, that normally are at the core of all the other fears that we can come up with. And if you sit there long enough, I think you can boil it down to one of those. This is all about avoiding vulnerability because I don't want to be hurt. I don't want to be disappointed because maybe I was so disappointed in the past by people who should not have let me down. Caregivers, siblings, spouses, primary people who have done some really shitty things. I don't want to be betrayed. Perhaps I don't want to be ridiculed. And therefore, I don't want more loss. Do you see here what this is about? I don't think I can handle more loss. I don't think I can handle more disappointment. It's our fear or fears that we have attached to the thing. It's our perception. And for a lot of people, I don't blame them for saying that. They've been through some stuff. It's just really sad when you think about what they're really losing by playing it safe. The final way that sometimes we stay in our comfort zone is we do things to not draw attention to ourselves. We don't want the spotlight. And that's often because you've had previous experiences, we've gotten into this before, where the spotlight was not fun. You were shamed, you were ridiculed, you were teased, you've been bullied perhaps, any kind of global shaming that you got at the dinner table, in the classroom, in front of friends, it doesn't matter. The spotlight was not good. You didn't have experiences where you were put in the spotlight, and everyone looked at you with love and compassion and appreciation and approval, right? Acceptance. So it would be normal for you not to want to draw attention to yourself. So therefore, you're not going to do things to stand out. You certainly are not going to take a risk. So all the fear or fears that you might have, remember you've come by them honestly. And I'm so sorry that you had to walk through things that brought those to you. I know there's some irrational fears on top of those that maybe you've come up with yourself, and that's okay. And I want you to take a hard look at those fears this month, and I want you to decide whether you want them to be in charge anymore. Because the beautiful thing is that you get to choose now. And that's what I call courage, and that's what we're going to get into next. So courage has a lot of definitions. I think to me, it's the ability to do what frightens you. To me, it means moving beyond your self-doubt and do something anyway. Like you have the self-doubt, but you decide to do it anyway because something else is more important at the moment. You've heard me talk about that before. Jumping in to help someone because they're hurting, even though you're probably not good at how you're trying to help them. Maybe you're not superhuman, but you don't care at the moment. You care about doing everything you possibly can to help them. That's why people are able to lift cars off of others trapped underneath. We come into this adrenaline strength, boy, that we had no idea we had. It's about choosing. Courage, to me, is all about choice, choosing the more important value. Choosing to not let yourself or others down in the moment. It means choosing what you want life to be, what you want life to be like after you face or move through a difficult experience. So it's what we want on the other side. I know for me, that's what has kept me going in lots of different moments in my life, because I was hell-bent on having what was on the other side, the good stuff, the wonderful things that were on the other side of my damn fear. Doing this podcast and connecting with you guys is a perfect example of that. What are some things, though, that take courage? This list is endless. And I want you to know that your list is yours too, right? Because we're all different. You might be afraid of things I'm not, and vice versa, for good reason, right? Usually experientially motivated. But these are some common ones that take courage, because the other thing I want to stop here for a moment and talk about is you probably have a really effed up, distorted view of what you should be afraid of and shouldn't be afraid of too. A lot of times when people grow up in families where there's manipulation going on and passive-aggressive stuff and not a whole lot of mirroring and empathy, you might have a distortion around what's hard to do and what's easy. So that's why the other reason why I want to go through this list is some of you may be struggling to articulate, what's normal-ish and what isn't. What do other people share in terms of fear with you? And what's kind of over the top? One of the things that takes courage is having a different opinion and voicing it. Because think about it, that's a risk. You might start an argument at the table. You might piss someone off. They might think something differently of you. So if you struggle with avoidance and people-pleasing, that's the last thing you're going to want to do. Okay? So it's a risk. It's a risk being different, being an individual, and letting go of that outcome. Sharing your smallest everyday fears with someone is another thing that takes courage. What if they think you're ridiculous, think you're less than, belittle you, shame you? What if they can't handle it? So sharing our little fears is very vulnerable, especially if you were raised to be tough, suck it up, don't say anything. It's going to be harder for you. Asking for help is another big fear that a lot of people have, and hilariously, they're too ashamed to admit it. What happens is you grow up in a family where asking for help probably didn't go well, and or there weren't people there to actually help you, like grown-ups weren't being grown-ups kind of thing. They expect you to figure it out. Maybe their help was judgy, controlling, intrusive. They're just trying to fix you and shame you. So you didn't want any help. So you don't know healthy ways to ask for help from healthier people. Doing things that are too big for you to do, outside of your expertise, too heavy to carry. If it's too big for me, I know that I have to ask for help. And I know it's not a sign of weakness. It's actually a lot worse, and we know this when we don't ask for help. We try to do it ourselves. And we usually screw it up in some way, shape, or form, and we end up having to call a professional anyway. When more damage has been done at this point. You know what I'm talking about. Asking for help is vulnerable because you're letting someone in, and you're leaning on and trusting. Another big reason why people don't ask for help is they can't trust someone to not drop the ball, because unfortunately they've had many experiences where that was actually true. People manipulated them, let them down, were not consistent, were not trustworthy, couldn't handle it. Another thing that is courageous, obviously, is facing a medical procedure or diagnosis or going to the dentist or going for surgery, getting test results. These are scary things. Those are the ones that are kind of universal that we all accept are scary. Another thing is quitting a comfortable job you've had. And hey, what about starting a new career later in life? That can be scary. What about having faith in something? Blind faith, where you have no idea how that's going to pan out. That takes courage. It amazes me to hear the stories of people who just had blind faith and did it anyway and did incredible things and do incredible things that help others. I love that. Admitting a big mistake is one I put down here too, because I think that's a big deal. I mean, especially if you have really blown it and you feel so much shame and guilt yourself, you've hurt people that you love in doing so, you've lost approval of others, healthy approval. Maybe your reputation has been really hurt by this, and it's not how you want to see yourself. When it's a blow to your integrity, it's hard. So admitting that and owning it over and over again without defensiveness takes a hell of a lot of courage. Living with it takes even more courage when you think about it. What about telling someone how you feel? That you appreciate them, that you love them, and you're the first one to say it. That could go either way, right? What about having difficult conversations, maybe risking conflict? You have to confront your spouse and say, hey, this isn't working for me. I need you to work on this. You're risking rejection, abandonment, all that stuff. What if you don't think you can detach from someone else's feelings? It's going to be hard to want to do that, especially when you're speaking truth to power. And truth to power can also feel like when you're grown-ass and you go home and face your parents about your childhood. That still feels like speaking truth to power. Trust me, I sit with clients who do this all the time. Maybe to your boss, maybe to leaders in the community. There's a lot of risk involved. We know that. If it's at work, you could lose your job. You could be labeled with horrible things. People could walk away from you. I mean, we're risking loss. And finally, standing up in front of people, speaking, singing, dancing, performing. That's risking rejection and ridicule. In other words, if we're bent on having acceptance and approval all the time, 24/7, nonstop, uninterrupted, forget it. We're not going to be able to take a risk. We're not. Courage means choosing something that's more important than people's approval. Maybe it's your values. It's your integrity. Desire to be authentic. Finally, honoring yourself. I want you to think about what is more important than other people thinking you're effing fabulous. So one of the other books I'm reading right now is The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. It's not a brand new book, but boy, is it amazing. So we're going to be exploring some of his material this month too, and I really encourage you to grab the book if you haven't already. It's a great read, so he does a great job of narrating it too. It really pulls you in. And in that book, he talks about looking at obstacles differently. He talks about fear, he talks about our perception, and taking action despite our fears. Basically doing it anyway. So we're going to be getting into his stuff, which is awesome. What are some of the reasons why we need to be more courageous? I think, number one, life is so short. This pandemic is teaching us that, isn't it? Where people can get sick so quickly and we lose them. So how much time do you really have left to kick it down the road, huh? And how do you even know you have that much time? We have no idea. The other reason why we need to be more courageous is that we can. We can start small, we can take small risks and gear up for the bigger ones, knowing, like we talk about here all the time, organically we're going to want and need more and better. Guys, we just raise the bar every time we take a step forward. That's what's so cool. You can start wherever you are and it will lead you to better places. We need to be more courageous because we know nothing changes until we make changes. Status quo is going to keep status quo. We can't wait for the world to be different, for people in our lives to change, for circumstances to change. We just can't. There are so many things that you can undo, redo, and find even better things from having the experience anyway. So I really want you to think about calculating the risk. Start with things you can reverse. That is going to empower you and challenge you in a wonderful way to want to do more and better and take a bigger risk. I don't think we start taking the bigger risk. I think we get empowered by taking small ones and feel the benefits from doing so. So one of the things I want to do before we go today is a visualization. So if you can, of course, unless you're driving or walking, try to close your eyes so you can fully immerse yourself in the visualization. But if that's not okay, I just want you to daydream and visualize the best you can. All right, you ready? I want you to imagine yourself, maybe a year from now, maybe only a month from now, feeling strong and full of wonderful courage. You're relaxed, you're grounded, you feel determined and on purpose. I want you to take a moment and picture yourself living the life you've always wanted if you weren't afraid to tackle things and take chances. I want you to take a moment and soak in this image. What do you see? Where are you and what are you doing? Even what you're wearing. Who's around you? And who isn't? How does this feel and why? Think about how proud you are having forged ahead and moved through some very difficult and scary things to get here. Think about the mountains you have climbed. Think about what you've proven to yourself, because that's what this has been really about, hasn't it? And how relieved you are to be on the other side of your fear. See you. How have you changed inside and out? How is your posture different? Your voice, how you use it, your language, how you use your voice. What is some of the good stuff there that feels different now? Focus on how real and genuine you feel. See how open, vulnerable, and happy you are. Your eyes are open. You see so much good stuff in the world that you couldn't see before. So many wonderful things about yourself that maybe you didn't see before. Okay, now take a big deep breath or two and relish in that new picture of your life. Soak it in. I want you to know that if you can see this, you can be it eventually, or you wouldn't be seeing it. I really encourage you to practice this visualization over and over again as many times as you can throughout the week. Keep focusing in on how different you want things to be and why. Get your why together. Embellish it. Add to the story. Don't dwell on the difficult things that you know you had to move through to get there. Don't focus on them right now. Right now, I just want you to hone in on the results and how good they feel. And if anxiety comes up, which it's going to, just say, hello, I know you're there. I'm not going to deny you, but I also know that my courage is becoming bigger than my fear and I will be okay. I know you're trying to protect me, fear and anxiety. I get it. And I'm starting not to need you so much anymore. I got things to do. I got people to see. I got places to go. I have authenticity to put out there. I have the real me who wants to get out there more and more. All right, so this month we're going to be focusing on, in the next sessions, the high cost of inauthenticity. not living your fullest life. We're going to talk about creating your box and then ripping it up. Getting emotional and getting real about how your box was created and how it's hurting your life. We're going to talk about what courage actually is and about actually acting on it. And then we're going to finish out the month by maintaining courage after the adrenaline fades, like when it gets real, when you're in the middle. Getting your why solid and sustainable. All right, so today we talked about the concept of holding yourself back in your life, maybe withdrawing and avoiding risk, versus grabbing the courage and fortitude to push ahead through the fear and do it anyway. Stay with us all month as we flesh out the rest of this. And we talk about how to grab some more courage as we assess the real risks of not honoring who we really are. And that's the key concept I want you to take with you. You're not really creating a new self, you're just uncovering. Hopefully that should take some of your anxiety away already. All right. Thank you so much for joining me today. May you continue to stay healthy, stay grounded, and hold on to hope. Do that visualization this week. Keep practicing it. I want you to become the best that you are meant to be. Be sure to check out the show notes at ownitpowercast.com. Sign up for the newsletter. That's all I send you every week. It has everything in it. You can get the downloads there too. I know some of you have been asking about that, and all you need to do is get the newsletter, and you can go to past issues and get the other downloads there if you've missed any. All right, so pay it forward. Keep focusing on loving you, and I'll see you next time.
We hope you took away some useful insights and tools you can begin using right away. If you did, please leave a positive review and share on your social media. Because could you imagine if everyone in your life really got it together? Remember, own it now, so you can really own it later.